Hi, and welcome to AP Daily. Today we're going to talk about topic 3.7, the diffusion of religion and language. In this video, we're going to discuss how languages, religions, and ethnic cultures diffuse from cultural hearths. What will we learn? First, what is a cultural hearth? I like to think of it as a cultural home. It is a place where an idea, an invention, an innovation, or if you take AP World, where a civilization was born, which in turn produces a lot of innovations and improvements on previous discoveries. As you'll see in Unit 5, you'll also talk about agricultural hearths, where you have the invention or the discovery, for lack of a better term, of agricultural products and practices. So, for example, in the Andes, you have the potato and several others. Language, religion, and ethnic cultures will be the focus of the rest of this video. And so with that said, let's look at language. And so simplistically, and I'm not going to take a deep dive into this for the sake of time, language is divided pretty much into language families, which is a group of languages that have a distinct origin. Language groups, they tend to have closer grouping together. So for example, if you take the words for your maternal authority figure of mother in English, it's madre in Spanish. It is madre, I think, in Italian, mère or mare in French, and in German, it's mutter or muti, and then even far away in Farsi and in Persian languages and dialects, it's mudar. So you can kind of see this kind of this. I call them cousin languages when you look, for example, at Indo-European languages. And then dialects, these are regional variances on language. In 3.5, we talked about patois, and there's a regional variance, say Jamaica and Haiti. An isogloss, this is a boundary that kind of represents a separation between language regions. I tend to characterize, for example, in parts of Latin America, you'll find various isoglosses of Spanish based on the admixture of maybe a local or indigenous language, or a fusion of even an outside language, whether it be the Japanese coming into, say, Brazil or Argentina, or the Chinese coming to Ecuador and Peru. Religion gives members of the various religions a sense of meaning. They give them a sense of identity. For religion, it's what I like to characterize as what adherents or believers believe is a right way of living. It gives people a sense of how did we get here? What are you supposed to do while you're here? And what happens when you die? And so as we look at religion, it's broken down, and we'll talk about a lot of this more in future videos. Universalizing religions, which seek to reach a lot of people over a wide swath of area across the globe. Ethnic religions tend to stay really close to home or within a specific group, and really don't seek to convert a lot of people. You have branches, which are basically large, fundamental branches of a tree. I like to think of the branches of a tree where you have these three tree, for example, if you take Christianity, you have three main tree trunks of Christianity. You have Catholicism, you have Protestantism, and you have Eastern Orthodox. I like to, in my class, I often like to bring an umbrella, and I'll bring up three kids and I'll have them stand up front, and the umbrella and blazing across the umbrella is the words Christianity. And so I signify that saying that this kid is Roman Catholicism, this kid is Protestantism, and this kid is Eastern Orthodox, but they're all under the same umbrella. I know it's kind of simplistic, but I think it kind of visualizes what the idea, the concept behind a branch is. And then broken down, even within those branches, you have denominations, which is a more localized subgroup of a religion, whether it be the Baptists, or if you're in terms of even Islam, where it has branches. You have Sunnis, you have Shia, and those are even broken down into denominations based on regional preference or other means. And then lastly, religions can be broken down. Are they monotheistic, with the root of that mono meaning one, theistic meaning coming from the Greek word meaning God, the word theos, which means worshiping one deity or worshiping one God. And then poly, which means many, where people worship many gods or many deities. ethnic culture. And this can go, I could talk at length about ethnic culture, but with that, a lot of times it is through migration and diffusion where they're acting in concert, whether it be the forced migration of a group of people, as I mentioned in the second point of the diasporas, like the transatlantic slave trade, the Trail of Tears in the United States. In these developed these ethnic enclaves and created the placemaking that we talked about in previous videos in topic 3.3, and especially in urban settings throughout much of the world. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have processes like gentrification, which you'll talk about in Unit 6, that can uproot an ethnic culture, as can war, civil wars, which happens in many places, and other conflicts. Let's look at an example. Here you have in Chicago a sign I saw when I was in Chicago, and I took it because I was really fascinated, not because, oh, this is just an old faded sign, but just looking at the language. And the area that it was in is an area that had a lot of immigrants from Mexico and also a lot of immigrants from Puerto Rico as well. Religion, this was taken in Los Angeles, which shows the diffusion of Buddhism from, particularly in this case, from Korea to Los Angeles. And again, going back to placemaking, Los Angeles has the second largest Korean population in the world. And it has the most Koreans outside of Korea. And you can see it in what's called Koreatown, the evidence of place. And you can see it exemplified here with this particular temple. And then in terms of ethnic culture and in terms of Cuban migration, whether it be in Miami or in Chicago or New York, it's exemplified by restaurants, for example. Here, this is a Cuban sandwich, and in essence, food establishments, grocery stores, and the like. As migrants tend to come from their country of origin, they tend to want the taste of home. And here you see that in this particular case. So what should we take away? Languages and language families, along with religions, ethnic cultures, and other cultural components, diffuse from their cultural hearths, going from their cultural center out to the rest of the global landscape. I'd like to give a shout out to the Broncos at Mansfield Legacy High School and teacher Jody Asali. Hi, welcome to AP Daily. Today we're talking about topic 3.7, diffusion of religion and language. In this video, we'll examine how universalizing religions are spread, how they're visually represented, and how practice and belief systems impact how widespread they diffuse. What will we learn? First, let's think of some things to consider. Universalizing religions seek to appeal to a wide group of people across the global cultural landscape. They try to be to everything to everyone, everywhere. Another concept we need to take into consideration is expansion diffusion. This is basically the movement of a cultural trait from its hearth or point of origin outward, usually by hierarchical or contagious diffusion, which you studied in topic 3.4. Relocation diffusion. This is the movement of a cultural trait by movement of people through immigration, emigration. Any of those processes will help to transmit cultural traits from one place to another. And then the concept of the cultural hearth. I'll come back to this again. I know a lot of teachers and students kind of get this word confused, but Webster says it's a cultural hearth, which stands for a cultural home. This is where an idea or an innovation, an invention, or even a civilization is born or it's basically its birthplace. So let's look at one of the most practiced universalizing religions in the world, and that's Christianity. It started out with Jesus Christ, who started out by proselytizing and converting people to Christianity. And then after his death, his disciples spread it all throughout much of the Eastern Mediterranean region. Later on, the Roman Empire helped to codify it by making it the official religion of the Roman Empire. So as the Roman Empire expanded, so did Christianity. It gave it the full backing of the empire. The Crusades brought Christianity to other parts of the Eastern Hemisphere as well. The age of exploration, where explorers seek to expand not only their political and physical empire, but also expand the empire of Christianity. This was focused primarily in the Americas, both North and South America, along with the Caribbean, all throughout much of Africa and Asia as well. Immigration to the United States. During the early years of the United States, some of the early migrants that came to the United States came to the United States due to religious persecution or opportunity for economic gain. And in doing so, they brought their religion of Christianity with them. Here is a religious map, and it kind of gives you an idea of where Christians are located. You'll notice that for the most part, a lot of the Christians are located in the Americas, much of Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, Australia, and even parts of Asia. Looking at a chart, and in this particular EK, one of the main things is looking at how religions are represented in graphical form. So here you can see that there are about 2 billion believers, or what we call in geography adherents. And mainly they're concentrated in the following countries. You can see United States with the lion's share of 230 million people, Brazil with 180 million people, Mexico with 100 million people as well. And then as you see in the chart, I kind of listed some of the reasons through colonization, missionary work, immigration, as we talked before. And then in the far right column, I kind of give you an idea of relocation diffusion, which primarily is the way that Christianity has diffused throughout the world. And then lastly, Nigeria, which shocks a lot of my students to see that Nigeria is one of the largest Christian populations in the world and growing, primarily through colonization and missionary work, but also now through just contagious diffusion as people start to come to Christianity in their own right. And so Nigeria is quickly becoming one of the world's centers for Christianity. And then moving to Islam. First, Islam diffused from Mecca to Medina, what is known in Islam as the Flight. And this marks the first year of the Muslim calendar. And then as time went on, Muhammad and his disciples throughout much of the Gulf regions expanded through contact with other peoples, Islam. And then after Muhammad's death, you had the empire building that went on, for example, the Ottoman Empire. And then one of the other ways that Islam expanded was through trade via the Indian Ocean or on into Southeast Asia. And so here's a chart to kind of look at the distribution of Islam. Now, this is not a total package, just kind of took the top 5 of the 1.7 billion people that practice Islam. You'll see that Indonesia, which throws a lot of people off, to see that Indonesia has the largest amount of Muslims in the world, concentrated, or I should say our popular belief is that all Muslims are in the Middle East, quote unquote. And I really don't even like that word Middle East, but it's what part of our popular vernacular. But in the Arabian Peninsula, around Iran, Saudi Arabia, we have this concept that that's where it is, but through trade and through immigration and other means, Indonesia has the most. Pakistan, which is in South Asia, has 180 million. And India, which again is in South Asia, to kind of throw that idea for a loop, has 172 million, and Bangladesh, again in South Asia, has 145 million. And so here's a map, and you can see kind of some of the distribution of Muslims, again in North Africa, Southwest Asia, as I like to call it. And then here we are in Indonesia. And of course, through migration, people have migrated, especially I'm going to use, for example, I've done extensive work in Morocco. There are a lot of Moroccans in Spain, a lot of them in Germany, a lot of them in France, which kind of goes back to historically where Morocco was a colony of France. And so there's this highway of Moroccans bringing Islam for their personal use into France. Buddhism. And Buddhism started in India by a prince, a noble, with the name of Siddhartha Gautama, or Gautama, however you want to pronounce that. He was, and once he got that, he achieved what was called enlightenment. Hinduism was the dominant religion in the region at the time. And so it really didn't take a big foothold as Hinduism had. So missionaries took Buddhism into places like China, what is now Vietnam, and then from there moved on to places like Korea and Japan. Immigration to the United States and Europe, especially post World War II, you had a lot of Buddhists that were migrating to the United States, say after the Vietnam War, after the Korean War, after World War II even. When you start to see, especially on the west coast of the United States, a great example of that, and in the city of New York. In the 21st century, Buddhism is kind of by word of mouth starting to spread to non-Buddhists who are adopting Buddhist principles, mainly the concept of meditation. You may have heard of the concept of mindfulness. Maybe your school practices mindfulness. My school is practicing mindfulness this year. And I know of a good friend. She's a faith practitioner, and she's teaching mindfulness in schools. And that comes out of the Buddhist tradition as well. So here we have a world religion map. You can see in orange, you can see the areas of greatest Buddhist influence in parts of Mongolia, much of Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, Japan, and even parts of Korea. You'll have significant Buddhist interactions there. And then again, here's again a chart, which again, this EK kind of stresses looking at the distribution of religions in a graphical form or a visual form. And so we see there are about 500 million believers of Buddhism, with China having the lion's share. Now, I know that map didn't show China as being mainly Buddhist, but there are a lot of people, again, similar to what I talked about here in the United States, people who practice maybe Taoism or some other religion that incorporate Buddhist traditions into their practice. Another thing too to consider is China doesn't necessarily officially recognize religion. And so a lot of people will maybe practice it in their homes, and you don't see these outward displays of religiosity. And in Thailand, Japan, Myanmar, among others, you can kind of see there how they fare in terms of the world of Buddhism. What should we take away? Universalizing religions try to be everywhere to everyone. They seek to reach far and wide, and their diffusion can be seen across the global cultural landscape. I'd like to give a shout out to the rampants of J.H. Rose High School in Greenville, North Carolina, and teacher Brian Callahan. My name is Greg Hill, and this has been your Hi, and welcome to AP Daily. Today we're going to talk about topic 3.7, diffusion of religion and language. In this video, we'll examine how ethnic religions are found near the hearth or spread through relocation diffusion and how they're visually represented. What will we learn? First, let's consider a few things. Ethnic religions tend to be found close to their hearth, our cultural home. They're deeply connected to a specific ethnic group. Many people are born into this, and they do not actively seek converts, but conversion is possible. So a good friend of mine, she married a guy that was Jewish, and she had to go to a couple of classes, and so she had to learn the ways of being Jewish, and they got married, and so they're living happily ever after. Ethnic religions primarily diffuse through relocation diffusion, i.e. through immigration primarily, or some type of diaspora or forced migration, and they're clustered when you look at them on the cultural landscape. First, let's talk about Hinduism. This is one of the world's oldest religions. It dates back thousands and thousands of years. It evolved in what is now known as South Asia or India, and fused with a lot of local religions to create what I call a polytheistic religion with monotheistic characteristics. You can go and do more research in how that plays out in terms of Hinduism. It is still centered around India, with many believing it to be Hindustan. So it kind of gives this like nationalist sentiment in India of Hindus that of a country for Hindus by Hindus, so to speak. And it's caused some religious strife between other groups. It diffused throughout the British Empire, so you see it in places such as Hong Kong, UK itself, and in other areas that the British have colonized and put a part of their empire, and also through immigration, as Hindus have traveled from South Asia to places like, again, much of Western Europe, the United States, and other parts of Asia and Africa. Judaism, it was born along the Eastern Mediterranean, and started out along the Eastern Mediterranean and then was dispersed. Jews emigrated and settled much of Europe. And so you can still see in the cultural landscape of much of Europe evidence of synagogues and other Jewish religious sacred space throughout much of Europe. Then, because of persecution like the Russian pogroms under Joseph Stalin and the Holocaust under Adolf Hitler, this led to the mass exoduses of Jews throughout much of the world. Then, post World War II, there was a turn to the Eastern Mediterranean as a lot of Jews sought a Jewish homeland, creating the current day state of Israel under a concept known as Zionism. Let's look at an example. So you can see here by this map the areas of concentration of Hindus. And again, this EK looks at charts, other visual representation, maps, graphs, in terms of showing the distribution of religion. And so here we look at the 1 billion Hindus across the world and where are they primarily located. You can see here much of it is in South Asia. And again, with other concentrations in much of Western Europe, and growing contingents in the United States as well. And moving on to Judaism, you can see here in the middle, here's Judaism in the Eastern Mediterranean, and its representation in terms of its 16 million adherents or believers. And I want you to look at that number, 16 million, which is significantly lower than some of the other religions we may have looked at in terms of chart or graph form. And so I want you to think about, maybe there's something you can discuss with your teacher. Why is it that there's only 16 million Jews? Is this a great example of how it's very insular in terms of it doesn't really diffuse a lot? I think so. And this is a great point for you to discuss with your teacher. Maybe this is a great connection to talk about in terms of connecting back to population. I often tell my students, connect the dots, connect the dots. What I mean by that is don't just study a particular unit in isolation. Where do we have other connections? Are there connections to population? Are there connections to migration? Are there connections to political geography? So these are some things to take into context when looking at religion and looking at numbers and why do this group of people have billions of adherents and why does this group have only a few million adherents? As you can see here, the lion's share are in Israel. And then you have a large contingent in the United States, many of those coming post-World War II, settling places such as New York, Florida, California, and Texas and Chicago. France, a lot of those are again, migrants who fled the Jewish persecution in Germany and settled in France and Canada as well. So what should we take away? Ethnic religions are clustered and tend to stay close to their cultural home or their hearth, and they only diffuse through relocation diffusion. I'd like to give a shout out to the Yellow Jackets of Central High School in Louisville.